and to my daughter, Claire, who will receive nothing. Because that's exactly what she deserves, my father said, voice steady and polished. They say funerals bring out the truth in families. But mine didn't wait for the eulogy. My truth came before the lawyer even opened the folder. I was seated at the far end of the Ashford Estates' great room, too far from the fireplace to feel its warmth, but close enough to hear every breath in the silence. Crystal glasses clinked, cousins whispered. Someone cleared their throat. The tension crackled harder than the fire behind me. Then my father stood, Charles Ashford. Silver hair perfectly styled, navy suit tailored like armor. The room hushed, expectant. Everyone assumed he would make a short speech before the lawyer began. A moment of respect, perhaps, gratitude, closure. Instead, he lifted his glass with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, a cold toast. To my son Logan, he said, voice steady and polished, who will lead the next chapter of our legacy, and to my daughter Claire. He turned slightly in my direction, but didn't meet my eyes. Who will receive nothing. Because that's exactly what she deserves. It landed like a punch across the face. Sharp, final, public. Gasps echoed. My Aunt Evelyn dropped her champagne. Someone muttered, Jesus Christ. Even the housekeeper froze in place. But me? I didn't blink. I sat with my back straight, one hand folded in the other. My heart was loud in my ears, but my face? Calm, composed. The smile on my lips wasn't for show. It was armor, because I already knew. I'd known long before he made it official, that this wasn't just a man cutting his daughter out of a will. It was a performance, a final power move. A public execution, served in velvet tones and estate-aged scotch. Charles Ashford never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Humiliation was his art form. And today, I was his canvas. But what he didn't know, what he could never imagine, was that this moment, his moment, was the last one he'd ever own. He thought I came to watch him win, but I was here to watch him fall. Growing up as Claire, Ashford meant learning one lesson early. Greatness had to be earned, unless you were born male. I did everything they said would make me worthy. Straight A's, student council president, a double degree from Stanford, business and environmental, engineering. At 23, I stepped in when one of our company's oldest logistics divisions started bleeding money. I proposed a restructure, slashed costs by 30%, and turned it profitable in 6 months. The board clapped. My father offered me a thank you dinner. Meanwhile, Logan, my brother, my father's favorite son, flunked out of Yale twice. He was given a corner office and a new Mercedes to help him get his head back in the game. I was told I was too intense, that I took things personally. That being passionate was fine, but maybe I should soften my tone if I wanted to be taken seriously. Charles Ashford didn't see leadership in his daughter. He saw liability, fragility, a woman too driven to be quiet and too smart to stay small. At family dinners, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to ask Logan how his golf game was. In boardrooms, he'd compliment my dress before dismissing my proposal. And when I brought him the startup concept I'd spent a year refining, a green supply chain initiative, he didn't even read it. He glanced at the cover page and said, "You're a lovely girl, Claire. Why not focus on things that make you more wife material?" That was the day something broke inside me. Not my ambition, not my loyalty, just the need for his approval. Because I realized then, I could never inherit a legacy that was never meant for me. Not as a daughter, not in his empire. So I stopped trying to belong, and I started preparing to build something of my own. While Charles Ashford saw me as a threat in heels, my grandfather, Edward Ashford, saw me. Not as a daughter, not as a liability, not as someone to control, but as someone capable. He used to sit with me in his library, books piled around us, like fortresses, and listen. Actually listen. About my ideas, my fears, the way I saw the future of the company, he once told me. The real problem with your father isn't that he doubts you. It's that he knows exactly how powerful you are, and that terrifies him. At the time, I thought he was being kind, maybe indulgent, but now I think he was warning me. When his health began to fade, it was me who visited every morning. Not Logan. Not my father. Me. I brought his medications. I read him the Wall Street Journal, twice if he forgot we'd already done it. I laughed at his terrible jokes. I combed his hair when the nurses forgot. I answered the phone when his lawyers called. I stayed late when he forgot my name and still held his hand. And one morning, in a rare moment of clarity, he said, "I may be dying, but I'm not blind. I see what you've done. I see who you are." That was the day he asked me to meet with his private counsel. Not the family lawyers, not the ones Charles had on retainer, someone independent, someone who could help him set the record straight. What I didn't know then was just how far he was willing to go to make sure I wouldn't be erased. They buried my grandfather in a mahogany casket lined with gold trim, fit for a man who built an empire from the ground up. And then, in front of everyone, my father buried the truth. The chapel was packed. Business partners, family friends, board members, politicians in tailored suits who owed my grandfather more than just a handshake. Everyone came to praise Edward Ashford. Everyone except me. I wasn't invited to speak. I wasn't even listed in the program. I sat 5 pews back, in black, quiet, watching Charles take the pulpit like a king addressing his court. He cleared his throat, let the silence sit, then began. My father was a man of vision, discipline, and loyalty. He believed in order, in structure, and above all, family. My son Logan will carry that vision forward. Not once did he mention me. Not once did my name pass his lips. I wasn't a granddaughter. I wasn't a caregiver. I wasn't even a shadow. Just a ghost at the edge of the kingdom. That's when I knew. It wasn't just about money, or legacy, or pride. Charles wasn't trying to disinherit me. He was trying to erase me. From memory. From history. From our bloodline. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't scream. Because I already knew what he didn't. I knew there was another will. A sealed envelope, signed, notarized, waiting. So I sat in silence and let him dig his own grave with every word. 2 weeks after the funeral, the Ashford Estates drawing room was full again. But this time, the mourning was over. The performance was beginning. The lawyer, Mr. Franklin Ellis, sat at the head of the long table, 2 folders in front of him, one slim, the other thick with wax seals. No one paid attention to the second one, except me. I'd been seated at the far end again, next to a drafty radiator like an afterthought. Logan and my father took center stage, all elbows on polished wood, sipping aged bourbon like they already owned the legacy. Charles adjusted his cufflinks and stood, a practiced smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Before we begin," he said smoothly, raising his glass once again, "I'd like to offer a final toast. To my son, Logan, who will lead Ashford Global into its next era with honor." He paused for effect. People nodded, smiled. Then his voice dropped, low, theatrical. "And to my daughter Claire, who chose emotion over loyalty. I hope you find peace wherever you land." Laughter bubbled at the edge of the room, tight, uncomfortable. Aunt Evelyn looked away. Mr. Ellis blinked slowly, then opened the first folder. Routine, distribution of assets, vacation homes, art, jewelry. I didn't move. I just waited, because I knew what was coming. He cleared his throat once more and slid his hand toward the second envelope. Thick, sealed, gold-stamped. "Per the late Edward Ashford's private directive," he said carefully, "the controlling shares of Ashford Global, the estate, and full voting authority are to be transferred immediately to Claire Ashford." Silence detonated. Logan choked on his drink. A glass cracked in someone's hand. My father's eyes didn't blink, just stared. I smiled, because now the room belonged to me. The moment my name was spoken, everything shifted. Not just in the room, but in the balance of power. But the truth? That moment wasn't luck. It wasn't revenge. It was design. My father thought he raised a daughter he could manage. What he actually raised was a strategist, and it didn't start at the will reading. It started the day he pushed aside my business proposal, 6 months of research, innovation, heart, like it was a napkin left at lunch. "You're a lovely girl, Claire," he said. "Focus on things that make you more wife material." I left his office in silence, went home, locked the door, and built a war room. I founded Steel Magnolia Ventures, a private LLC under a pseudonym, joined think tanks he never tracked, consulted for fintech firms, started investing in climate startups with real revenue and real teeth. I learned to keep my tone sweet, my smile tight, my ambition folded behind silk blouses and neutral lipstick. Every Sunday dinner, every board meeting where I was asked to fetch coffee while Logan gave half-baked pitches. I was listening, watching, calculating, and when Grandpa's health began to slip, I didn't lean in for inheritance. I leaned in because he mattered, because dignity matters, because I wanted to protect what was left of the man who once told me, "Control doesn't make you powerful, Claire, but clarity does." So when I saw the corners Charles was cutting, the way he rushed medical documents, manipulated staff, pushed for power of attorney, I acted. I asked Grandpa if he trusted the family lawyers. He didn't. I asked if he wanted a second opinion. He nodded. I contacted Mr. Ellis. We drafted a directive with crystal clear terms, third-party witnesses, multiple mental assessments, ironclad, untouchable. So when the envelope opened, it wasn't a twist. It was a trigger, a plan, executed with precision, because I didn't just survive the empire he tried to keep me out of. I studied it. And then I built my own. At first, my father said nothing, just sat there, stunned, glass frozen midair, lips parted in disbelief. Logan blinked like the room had turned upside down, and then the lion roared. Charles slammed his hand on the table. The room flinched. "This is a farce," he growled. "You manipulated an old man. You took advantage of his decline." He turned to Mr. Ellis, voice rising like thunder behind polished control. "This directive is invalid." He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. Ellis didn't blink. He calmly pushed a folder across the table. "Mr. Ashford underwent 3 independent assessments during that time," he said. "All confirmed full cognitive capacity. These changes were not only legal, they were intentional." The air turned thin. My father's anger began to splinter, not from strength, but from panic. He stood and started pacing, barking half-formed protest to no one in particular. "You don't understand what you've done, Claire. You're not ready for this. You'll ruin everything your grandfather built. This isn't some girl boss fantasy. This is real business." I let him rage. I let him burn. And then I stood, slow and steady, and said, "I've been ready for years, Dad. I just stopped, waiting for your permission." The room froze again. For the first time in his life, Charles Ashford realized what he was actually dealing with. Not a daughter, not a disappointment, but a rival. And I could see it in his eyes. He knew he'd already lost. The next morning, before the city stirred, I stood outside the towering glass doors of Ashford Global. No fanfare, no cameras, no press release. Just me. A black coat, a briefcase full of plans no one was ready for. My heels echoed through the marble lobby as I stepped inside, this place I'd known since childhood. Back then, I used to visit with my grandfather, holding his hand in elevators too big for my legs. Today, I was the one holding the keys. First stop, my grandfather's old office, the corner suite with skyline views and power in every inch. I stepped in, exhaled, and changed the locks, not symbolic, tactical, because I knew Charles wasn't going to walk away quietly. He'd call in favors, pull strings, whisper poison into boardroom corners, but I wasn't giving him a single door to walk through. Then I got to work. One by one, I scheduled private meetings with every department head, not to dictate, but to listen. I asked about morale, burnout, long-term vision, the culture behind. The numbers, the things my father never cared to ask, and I left a paper trail. Every meeting, every improvement, every signature. Let him say I'm inexperienced, I thought. Let him try to discredit me. I'll have receipts. Because this wasn't about holding power. It was about transforming it. He ran this company through fear, silence, and loyalty bought with perks. But I wasn't here to keep his empire intact. I was here to rebuild it into something better. Cleaner, smarter, stronger. And the only way to do that? Walk into the lion's den and remind the pride who really leads. He walked in like he still owned the place. Charles Ashford, navy blazer. Gold buttons polished, smile rehearsed. Logan flanked him, smug as ever, gripping a manila folder like it held the future. Maybe it did, but not the one they expected. The boardroom was full, every seat taken, executives, senior partners, legacy shareholders. They all looked up as he entered, and Charles gave them what they came for. "Gentlemen," he said, not even glancing at me. "Let's talk damage control." I waited. Let him have his moment. The illusion was still intact. For now. He slapped Logan on the back and took his old seat, head of the table. Like nothing had changed. Like the floor. Beneath him wasn't already crumbling. "We've reviewed the fallout," he said briskly. "Minimal media attention. If we move quickly, we can undo the confusion. Claire's tenure can be repositioned as transitional." I cleared my throat. "This isn't a damage control meeting," I said calmly. "This is a restructuring session." That got their attention. I handed out sealed packets, one for each board member. Inside, evidence, embezzlement under Charles's leadership, offshore accounts. Illicit investments in shell corporations registered to dummy addresses. Then came Logan's file. Misuse of company funds for personal travel, first-class flights, a company-sponsored yacht party in Ibiza. The silence was suffocating. Charles opened the folder. His jaw tensed. Logan went pale. "This is absurd," my father muttered. "None of this holds water." "It's all verified," I said. "Audited by a third-party compliance firm. Today, the board will vote." Logan stood up too fast. "You hacked my emails. This is illegal." "It's called oversight," I replied. "Welcome to it." The vote wasn't close. It wasn't even competitive. Unanimous. Logan, stripped of access. Charles, barred from all company dealings, effective immediately. Their keycards were deactivated before the meeting ended. I escorted them to the elevator myself, and as the doors began to close, Charles turned, voice low and bitter. "You think this is over?" I leaned in slightly. "No. I think it's just beginning." He was waiting outside the building like he belonged there. No driver, no entourage, no signature cufflinks or power walk swagger. Just Charles Ashford, shoulders hunched in a wrinkled overcoat, staring up at a company that no longer answered. To him, I almost didn't stop. But right before the glass door slid shut behind me, I turned. He looked smaller, like the air had gone out of him, like the building he once ruled had shrunk him down to human size. "Morning, Dad," I said. "You know what they say, pride comes before the fall." He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. That part was already done. This was about gravity. For decades, he built his legacy on fear, on silence, control, polished lies in polished suits. He made sure his voice was the only one that echoed in boardrooms, in family dinners, in my own head. But now? His voice had no weight. His name didn't open doors. His empire still stood, but it no longer stood for him. And I didn't have to gloat. I didn't have to say, "I told you so." Because the look in his eyes said it all. He finally saw what I had become. Not a disappointment, not a soft-hearted liability, but the woman who took everything he denied her and built something stronger, something that didn't need his approval to matter. As I turned and walked through the doors, past the receptionist who now greeted me as Ms. Ashford, I realized he never saw the fall coming, because he never looked up from his own throne long enough to notice someone was quietly climbing higher. I didn't celebrate. No champagne, no press photos, no victory speech on the top floor, Because this wasn't a conquest, this was a correction. In the days that followed, I worked, harder than ever. I rewrote department structures. I launched a zero-tolerance policy for fraud, nepotism, and bullying. I sat with people who'd never been asked for input and listened. Really listened. I replaced whisper networks with transparency initiatives, created mentorship programs for women who'd been passed over, extended maternity leave, brought in new blood, diverse, driven, unseen talent. Because this empire wasn't just mine to hold, it was mine to heal. The media called it a power play. Daughter dethrones CEO, father in corporate coup. But they didn't understand. It wasn't about revenge. It was about removal, of rot, of fear, of the myth that leadership has to look like Charles Ashford. One night, I came home late, still in heels, still clutching my phone, and peeked into my son's room. He was already tucked in, blanket half kicked off like always. He looked up, half asleep. "Mommy," he mumbled, "why was Grandpa so mad today?" I paused, smiled. "Because," I said gently, brushing the hair from his forehead. "He forgot that girls can be in charge too." He nodded, already drifting. A new truth settling into his small, safe world. And in that moment, I realized something. Charles thought the inheritance was the company. The board votes, the buildings, the title on the brass plaque. But he was wrong. The real inheritance was me. The girl he tried to erase, the strategist he underestimated, the woman who rebuilt the empire in her own name. And this time, it wouldn't be built on obedience or fear. It would be built on purpose, for my son, for the woman I became, for every daughter who was told to stay in her lane. The first few weeks after the takeover were a blur. Meetings, signatures, headlines, sidelong glances from people who used to look through me like I was made of glass. Now they called me Miss Ashford. Now they held their breath when I walked in the room. But some nights, the silence returned, the ache. That tiny voice inside me whispering, would he have done this if I'd been a son? Was there ever a version of this story where he stood beside me instead of in my way? I didn't know. I still don't, because healing doesn't arrive like a contract or a vote. It stumbles in, late, awkward, unannounced. Just like the package that arrived on my desk one rainy afternoon. No return address, no stamp. Just my name, written in familiar, shaking handwriting. Inside, a photograph. Old, worn, slightly bent at the corners. It was me, maybe 5 years old, sitting on my father's shoulders at a company picnic, my head thrown back in laughter, his hands holding me like I was something precious. On the back, in faded ink, were 4 simple words, "You always had it." That was it. No apology, no signature, no explanation, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't need one. I slipped the photo into the top drawer of my desk, next to the company seal, not as a reminder of him, but of me. The girl who once believed her father's love defined her worth, and the woman who no longer needed his love to feel powerful. Because in the end, the real inheritance wasn't the boardroom. It wasn't the empire. It was the fire he tried to extinguish, and I learned how to carry it.